Dalton Burgett, thank you very much. You being a lawyer, was that part of your parents' background, family? Was there law anywhere there?
No. The closest thing to law there was, my experience with law was Ed O'Connor, who was an attorney in Brockton, New York, and he was a real close friend of the family. And I talked to him about going to law school, and he encouraged me. But no, my dad was a businessman in Dunkirk. We had the motion picture theaters there, and what was called the Town and Country Department Store back then. Some people many years ago would know it as the old Safe Store. And we had a sporting goods store and a marina on the lake. I mean, he had a lot of businesses. They all kind of, times changed and everybody went to malls and the theaters got closed. They're, like these downtown theaters. And see, an interesting thing happened in the theater business. The theaters, as we know them downtown, were 200 seats, let's say, or 300 seats. And the motion picture industry came out and decided that they were going to own the movie. It came, you bought it, sort of, but they came and they didn't want what you got. It was like this: you'd get. They had the bookings, they had all the income from the theater for, let's say, the first 3 weeks of the movie. And then the rest of the 3 weeks or 6 weeks was the theater owners. Well, hell, when you had these old theaters, you filled them up. In a city like Dunkirk, 4 or 5 showings, and you pretty well have concluded who's going to watch the movies and who aren't. And then, you get pickings after that. And so it changed the whole thing. So what the theater owners did is they started building smaller theaters out in the mall, 80, 100 seats, so that they get their percentage. Let's say they got the theater, the company that owned the movies would get 100% maybe the first 2 weeks. They may not have gotten the candy and the popcorn and all of that, but the tickets going into the theater, and then percentage-wise it would go down, and then eventually the last 2 or 3 weeks were the 100% went to the theater owners, so they got smart fast. Yeah. What they did is they just said to hell with it, and they cut the theaters down to a small size so they could carry on a longer period of time with a full house or enough people going to the theaters that could make money.
So you graduated from Dunkirk High School.
Dunkirk High, 59, Miami University, 63. And Cornell in 66.
Along the way, did you keep in touch with the Jamestown or the Chautauqua County legal community while you were there, or just?
Not really. I mean, Ed O'Connor was a real close friend of the family, and he and my dad played cards and played golf. So, I mean, I knew what was going on, and then he was a district attorney when I was in law school. And I was probably going to start practicing with him over in Brockton. And then what happened was he became county court judge. And I forget who the judge was, but he died. And Ed, being the district attorney, as he was at that time, became the county court judge, so there was really no place for me there. So I graduated a year later, and I interviewed with it was a Fredonia firm. I can't think of it right now. But Mike, I interviewed, Ed O'Connor said to me, why don't you go talk to Mike Lombardo? Because I told him I wanted to do trial work. And Mike was, of course, the premier trial lawyer in Jamestown back then. And I went and interviewed with him. John Selstrom was there. It was Lombardo and Pickard, and Clarence Pickard was Mike Lombardo's partner for many, many years. And he died, and John became his partner. John was working for him at the time, became Mike's partner, and I came over and worked for them as a law associate, and then eventually I became a partner within 2 or 3 years, and I was there 17 years. I stayed there until Mike died. And then I decided I wanted to do my own thing, and I went out and started Burgett and Robbins. Dale Robbins was in there with us at that point, and Chuck Hall, and I can't think of the young lady. She practices over in Sinclairville now, or Hope Knowles. Hope was in there with us. We had quite a number. I mean, there were 5 or 6 or 7 lawyers in there, and I just wanted to do my own thing. I mean, it was a general practice there, and I really wanted to do trial work and try to focus on it. So I asked Dale to come with me, and he said, yep, and so we started.
Why trial? What was it that drew you to that?
Well, I didn't like doing real estate, and I didn't like, I didn't want to be in the office all the time. I mean, I really liked the courtroom. I liked being there, and I wasn't in the real estate. And at that time, we also had we did a lot of workman's comp work, and you go in front of a hearing officer and and go through your motions there, and it's usually a pretty well foregone conclusion. And it just wasn't my interest, and I liked trying cases, and Mike gave me all I wanted, because at that time we were insurance defense attorneys for National Grange Mutual here in town, Kemper Group, Merrill Casualty. We had a lot of insurance companies. We did insurance defense work, and I was doing all that defense work. Mm-hmm. And I built up experience. I developed, I had a lot of, and back then, see, you didn't have arbitration like insurance companies do now. That saves them a lot of money. In the old days, if there was a car accident, in order to recover from the driver of the other car, if he was negligent, you had to sue him. And your insurance company would hire you to do it because they didn't want to pay. I mean, his insurance company didn't want to pay. So we tried them in city court, and that's where I got my experience. I probably tried 2 or 3 a month jury trials. They're little 6-man jury trials in city court for $500 or $800 over a fender or something. It was nuts. And they finally figured that out. Insurance companies, hell, will go to arbitration, and we can do it in an hour, or 2, and not have to impanel a jury and go through all of that crap.
Was that Lester Berglund at the time?
Yeah, Les Berglund.
Well, talk about Mike Lombardo. I mean, he's kind of iconic in the distant memory for most, but talk about him.
Well, Mike was in his 70s, I would say, late 60s, early 70s when I came there. And he was very famous. You've heard of the Drew Pearson. Mm-hmm. Drew Pearson wrote an article about Mike in the New York, whatever it was at that time, Daily News or whatever it was, and said, if you're ever going to commit murder, commit it in Chautauqua County. And I heard Mike Lombardo. John Scott Selstrom, my former partner, has that article somewhere. When I left, he wanted to keep it, and I wish I had too. At least had it photocopied. And it said, commit murder, hire Mike Lombardo, because at that time, Mike had won 12 straight murder cases, got 12 people acquitted. I mean, he was an incredible lawyer. And you don't, I mean, guys like F. Lee Bailey and all these other high-end, famous lawyers, I mean, they never had a record like that. Right.
What was it that made Mike kind of unique that way? I also recently had a memorial service for Sam Alessi.
Yes.
He talked about Mike and the days of bootlegging.
Yeah, well.
He kind of cut his teeth there.
Well, yeah, we were involved in that a little bit. We represented the bookies in town. Blackie County, Peep Spinella, Lefty. I can't think of Lefty's last name, but he had no left arm. And Blackie County was sort of I don't know if they were connected. I think they were with the Buffalo, and this was just a little finger out there of bookies. But every year, or I wouldn't say every year, about every 2 or 3 years, the Jamestown Police Department would round them all up, and they'd have bail down there, and Blackie's wife would call and say they arrested Blackie Peeps, so on. And they're getting ready to take him up to county jail. Mike would come in and say, get on there and bail him out, get him out of there before they cart him up there to Mayville. So I would go down, and I'll never forget, they were getting ready to load him in a paddy wagon the one time I was there, and I said, hold it up, guys, I'm going to bail him out. And Blackie was handcuffed to Peeps, and Peeps was handcuffed to Lefty. He was always the last guy because he only had one arm. They couldn't handcuff the next guy. So he was always the tail gunner.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. So from there, I stayed there till Mike, went into a nursing home. He's a wonderful man. And that's when in 1980, I started out on my own.
I got if I can see if I can quickly find it here, a composite. And the composite of I guess 1967. And I'm going to try to find it here and just see if you got any memories of some of these guys. Some war stories, because you're as always very young, and so here, just you might want to
Sure.
play around with that and see.
Oops, you lost it.
I lost it. There we go. Actually done. I'll get it back. There we go. And if you can see that, but.
Yeah, let's see. Well, of course, I know Jim Abdella, Les Berglund I knew. Roland Fancher, I had several trials in front of Phillips. McKinley Phillips was the surrogate judge. And they were all wonderful people. I mean, they were fun. And, of course, Art Bailey I had some dealings with. John Barrett I knew.
What do you know about John Barrett? My gosh.
He, I don't know much about him, but he was a friend of my dad's. From how that relationship developed, I don't know. I mean, maybe through Ed O'Connor, I don't know. But I don't know really what John did. He was not here very long, maybe a year or two. And but he was pretty well known and I think well respected in the community. I know most all these guys now. I mean, Stan Lundeen, I played golf with yesterday. I mean, I see him all the time, and he's doing well. And John Goodell had a lot of matter.
You have a John Goodell story?
Well, yeah, I do. Mike, and was towards the end of his career. Mike had a divorce with John Goodell. And I liked John, but John was a different guy. I mean, he was a very good lawyer. He was dedicated to his clients. There's no question about that. He was doing a divorce, and Mike had this lady, and John had the man. And I think I was there, but not with Mike on that case. I was there for something else. It was a pretrial conference and something else. And all of a sudden I heard an argument start on. Apparently, John Goodell did it as a joke, but said something about, she was very good looking, I guess. And Mike was, he wasn't backing down on the settlement negotiations and sort of suggested that was there some relationship there. And Mike took a burn to it. And Mike preached over, and Roland Fancher was there. He was the judge, and Mike grabbed him by the tie. He was going to whack him, I guess. And Mike was, he was 5'6", with his high heels on. I mean, he was a short guy. And that Mike would never, I don't ever remember him ever speaking to John Goodell again. I mean, that was it. He got, and it was real, I know John didn't mean it in a drug, joking, but Mike took a burn to it and really got upset with it. And, Mike his wife, Bertha, Mike Lombardo's wife Bertha, they were very close. And I think that if just the fact that someone might have said that and it got out or something, really upset Mike, because he really loved his wife.
Yeah. Give me your best Art Bailey story. He pontificates.
Who's this?
Art Bailey.
What do you have? You were at that 40th lawyer thing up there. And I'll never forget what the judge was. Remember, one was there from the Supreme Court, and it really stuck in my mind as sort of defining Art Bailey. He said, Art, he said, I listened to you in court, and you one of the most beautiful presentations you ever made, but when it was all over, I didn't know what the hell you said. That's in the film.
Yeah. Well, we always allowed us, at least in our younger generation here, that if we ever had a house that was under foreclosure to be foreclosed, you'd hire Art and you'd be there forever.
Yeah,
the rest of your life.
That's right. He would tie things up. Art was a good creditors' rights guy,
Yeah.
and he's a great lawyer. I mean, and he had a lot of personality. He does have a lot. He's not deceased. He has a lot of personality. I enjoyed him. We always got along, but he was always quite interesting on how he handled things. At the end there, he was doing those there's a group of lawyers. I was in ATLA, American Trial Lawyers Association, and Art was too. And Art often spoke. And what he did was he would he and this group took on these shareholders' rights things, where the shareholders figured they didn't get full measure or whatever it was, and Art would do those class action lawsuits, and he was involved in quite a few of those, I guess. I mean, he told me about them, and I think that's where his practice led him.
Were there attorneys in the bar, and I'm sure you probably recognized them as you went through that, when you saw that you were on the other side, when you were representing the insurance company and the plaintiffs, and saying, all right, this is just going to be a little bit, I got to grind in a little bit harder. There's not a resolution, or there's sometimes a guy or two that sort of got your attention when you were involved?
Yeah, you could always plan on, Al McKee did insurance defense work, and if I was a plaintiff, I was dealing with Al and trying to settle a case. Al McKee, Bill Blood was tough. John Plum was tough. I mean, John, and of course, I don't know, I'm sure Bill Blood is deceased by now.
Last year.
Is that right?
Yeah, shockingly, I would have otherwise grabbed him by now.
Yeah, Bill was a very fine lawyer. He's a very religious man, surprisingly, and not surprisingly, but he was a devout Catholic, and he did a lot for the Catholic Church and the community, the Catholics. And he was a very good defense lawyer. He didn't do any plaintiff's work that I know of. He represented Travelers, and Travelers wrote a lot of insurance around here. And so I ran into Bill a lot, and he was an excellent lawyer. Yeah. And you really had to know your stuff. I mean, you really did. And you had to be very well prepared, not only with your clients as witnesses, but in the motions and the objections that are raised in a case, in a trial. You better have he was going to. I always tried to sit down and think, what the hell is he going to raise? What objections? Yeah. And then try to find the cases to substantiate my position, because I knew they were coming. Yeah. And he was really good at it.
You started off in defense work, representing various insurance companies you mentioned. Was it easier or more difficult to kind of switch your kind of mindset to plaintiff work?
No, it was easy. I mean, that's where the money was.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, in a small community like this, a small city, I mean, insurance defense work, you get paid by the hour. You have a contract with the insurance company. I can't remember what we got, maybe $100 an hour and $1,000 a day trial work. I mean, that's what you got. And it was a lot of work preparing cases. I mean, some of those were complicated and very hard, and you really didn't get paid a lot. I mean, you could live on it, but you weren't going to get rich on it, that's for sure. And I don't know what happened. After a while, they got overbearing, I felt. They would, you had to write a report every 30 days, okay, on the status of your case. Well, hell, I mean, we're talking about a $3,000 or $4,000 case, and you got to write a 2-hour report. It takes a couple hours every 30 or 60 days, and there was just a lot of bookkeeping to it. And it got to, in my mind, to the point where it wasn't worth doing. And I took our files at that time. I think Dale and I, we might have had 30 files with Kemper Group. And I just took them up, had lunch with them, thanked them, said, I appreciate all the business you gave me, but here. You know, I said, I just don't feel that I can devote the time to that and make any money at it. I mean, and that's the way it was. And so, and I was getting some plaintiffs' cases, and I was bumping into conflicts of interest. I'm representing a plaintiff, and all of a sudden the insurance company for the defense that's defending it is Kemper, or one of the ones I represented down here. So there was a conflict of interest in a way, and though it wasn't written in stone, a lot of guys did it, I just felt that it just wasn't a good thing.
Before we get into a number of cases, because clearly you and the firm had a terrific reputation as plaintiff's counsel and a referral source for a lot of people in Chautauqua County. I mean, you were the go-to guys. But you had a unique case where you were appointed special prosecutor by the Honorable Frederick Marshall, Supreme Court Justice, to prosecute Robert
Earl Sawyer,
multiple murder in 1988. How did that all come to be?
Well, it started out, Sawyer, give me a few minutes background so
Sure,
you understand what that Sawyer murder was before I got involved. Robert Earl Sawyer was a killer. Just to give you an idea, well, we'll work up to it. He was a born killer. I hate to say that. He was, I think, in prison from about the time he was 12 years old on. And he came here to Chautauqua County after he got out of jail, and he robbed Hogan's Hut, which most people know. And there was a young girl in there named Jeannie Hum. And Jeannie was a security guard at Chautauqua Institution. And he came to rob Hogan's Hut. And unfortunately for Jeannie Hum, he recognized her because he laid carpet. He was a carpet layer. He laid carpet in her parents' house, and she was living there at the time. And he also remembered her, I'm sure, that she had a police uniform on when he saw her at Chautauqua Institution when he laid carpeting in there. So he knew he had to kill her. And so he had her lie down in an aisle at Hogan's Hut. It was 30, I can tell you, it's 33 inches wide. And bothers me to this day. And he shot her twice in the back of the head with a .41 Magnum, which is a, very powerful gun. It was awful. And John Arnowine and John Siriano, who was the undersheriff at the time, were assigned to investigate the case. And a Volkswagen was seen near the murder site, and of course, they knew every career criminal or every badass that was in Chautauqua County by virtue of the fact that they were sheriffs, and they had that information. They all knew who was who. So they suspected maybe that was who it was. And so anyway, they undertook an investigation. And Sawyer was had gotten married and was living out in Sherman on the Marks Road. And the lady he worked for or married was a real nice person, and she had no idea. And she worked for the county, and she had a house with a barn, and she was a horsewoman. And Sawyer, during this period of time that she was living with him, she didn't know anything about him. And when he was laying carpeting, he and this other guy would case a house when they laid the carpeting. And they apparently put in carpeting at a teacher's house, an older man, and they found some photographs or something, and so they started blackmailing him, and they got his credit card. And they went up to they went to Erie and bought used the credit card and bought a pair of cowboy boots. His friend who was with him, see, he was always smart. He brought his friends in with part of the crime so that they wouldn't talk. And this guy got these cowboy boots and left the box in Sawyer's car. This was the story. And Sawyer, when he went down and robbed and murdered Jeannie Hum, he took that box and he put his handgun in there, and he had taking those, you scratch them off for money, the state lottery tickets, and he got all of the lottery tickets after he shot her, took those as in the money in the cash register, and he scratched every one of them off, and he had a pile of them, I guess, from there, and he put them in that box with a gun and some ammunition, and stuck it and cut a hole in the wall in the upstairs of the barn, and he put the stuff in there, the gun he killed her with, and nailed it shut with old-fashioned square nails. And Ernewine, and they couldn't figure out where he got the .41 revolver. And the story, it ends up, that's part of the trial, how all of a sudden that appeared. But so they were following, they were getting closer and closer. And they found out from a guy that he worked with that Sawyer had asked this guy to buy 41 shells because he couldn't buy them, he was a felon. And they got him at M&M's, the guy did, and gave him to Sawyer, and they went out and shot through there was a big ravine, and they shot across at a target in a tree. And just why, I don't know, but they did. And God bless Ernewine Siriano. They went there, they got the guy who was a cohort that was with them at the time, and showed where the tree was, and they climbed down and climbed up into the tree and dug out the bullets. They found some. And then they had Jeannie Hum's bullets that passed through her, and then they had these bullets, and they could make a match on the pistol. They arrest him. Sawyer is brought back to here. He'd been convicted. He'd now been arrested in Maine for murdering his partner up there. And Sawyer, being a carpet layer, his famous MO was to roll a person up in a rug, anyone he killed. The weapon of choice was a hammer. And he took this guy out and needed help burying him up in Maine. And he got another ex-con up there that he knew, and he came out and helped bury this guy. And then this fellow got nervous because he saw Sawyer's car parked in the neighborhood, and he was afraid he was going to kill him. So he went to the police and told them what happened. So they got Sawyer on that one, and just to show you how cold he was, when they dug down, they exhumed his body, there was McDonald's on the guy's chest and French fries, and Sawyer had been eating his hamburger and French fries while they were burying him. And they convicted him up in Maine, but they brought him back here because this was such a heinous crime. They wanted him pinned down for life. And so they brought him here. The case was tried in front of Leetown Adams. Sawyer said he didn't want the public defender's office, but he wanted a lawyer, but he didn't have money. And Lee Town Adams said, if you don't want the public defender's office, you're going to have to try it yourself. You don't have any money. But I want you, you do have that right. Well, that went to trial and he was convicted. And John Ward prosecuted that as district attorney, and they got him convicted, and he went up, and the appellate division reversed it and said he's absolutely has a right to counsel, and you should have at the very least had a public defender sit with him and advise him if he had any questions. And the failure to do that, they threw the case out and brought it back here to retry it. So now they had a conflict of interest because I think Ed Fagan was involved in it, and he wanted Ed Fagan, but and I don't know if Ed was a public defender there or not. It's blurry for me, but so they had a conflict of interest somewhere in there, and so they had to appoint a special prosecutor. Well, I got nominated. I got the sheriff's department apparently asked that I prosecute him based on a case I had had with the sheriff's department previously, the famous Purpura case. So I said, okay, I don't have any choice. They appoint you. You're an officer of the court. So I went up and I prepared the case, and we tried it in Buffalo. They got to change the venue to Buffalo, and I went up and tried it. And while he was in Buffalo incarcerated, somehow Sawyer got himself out on the roof of the sheriff's department, or the jail up in Erie County. He went up a vent or something. I don't know how the hell that happened. They got him again. They got him before he escaped. And then the word was out that he had a girlfriend who was going to try to break him out. I mean, it's bizarre. So I'm prosecuted to go in there and try this case. Now the case has been tried before. So, and now Kevin Lawmer is defending him as a public defender, and they have the whole lawsuit. And I'm sitting there saying to myself, I can't try it the way they tried it, because they're going to know every question. They're going to be prepared for everything I do. So I switched everything around as best I could. So it was, I put different witnesses on first, and I tried to make it like a new trial so that they were off balance. I could get the conviction. And so we tried it up there, and it was lasted about 8 or 10 days. I don't know. Freddie Marshall was really a tough judge, and he made you start at 8:30 in the morning, and you didn't stop. And if you had to raise your hand if you wanted to go to John, yeah. And he said, "We're going to get this thing tried, and it's going to be done in 2 weeks. I got a very busy schedule, and we're going to go and do it." And so we were there till 6 o'clock at night. Rob Liebers had just started with me and had been with our office 3 months out of law school, and I had him up there with me to keep. There were about 180 exhibits. We had a thing you pushed down to they kept it up in the DA's office under lock and key, and then the exhibits were brought down, and I mean, we had a pile of them. Right in the middle of the trial, we get a call. Of course, it's being reported, you know, the Post Journal, everybody's following it, and every time you step out, the TV was there. And down in Warren, we got a call from some guy that says, "I think I know whose pistol that is. I know that pistol." What? So Ernewine calls me, and I said, "Jerry, I don't want to meet this guy, but you meet him and show him the pistol." And Ernewine took the pistol over, and sure enough, the guy said, "I can identify that. Absolutely, it was mine." And he said, "I lost it about the time I had carpeting laid here." And this is out of the blue. This is 5 days in trial. So I had to approach a judge. I said, "I think we got some new evidence here." And Marshall said, "What is it?" And I told him, and he said, "Oh, that's very relevant." He said, yeah. So, and sure enough, who was the guy that laid the carpeting? Robert Earl Sawyer. Signed it, you know, and he was the guy that did it. And so I had to have a lady from Sears come in, said he worked for us. Yes, he did it. And so now we got him, I thought we had him tied up pretty tight. And the conviction came in, and he was convicted. And there couldn't have been a worse person. Yeah.
This had to be exhausting.
Oh, it was.
I mean, I don't know how you get done with that emotion, the time, the energy that you have, and then try to, what do you do afterwards? I mean, how does one wind down after something like that?
Well, I lost 25 pounds. Well, you do. I can remember when it was over, the newspaper people there and the television people. I got out of there and I came home and I said to Judy, let's go to a movie. That's what we did. Yeah, we went to a movie.
You mentioned Purpura in passing. That's another case of note of yours.
Yeah, I defended him. Yeah. And he was acquitted. It was a pretty high-profile case because what was happening, women who were in the news, in the newspaper, would be given, they'd get a call from, it sounded like a woman's voice, interviewing them and talking to them, and it was kind of, there was several reports that they were getting these calls from a female voice. And this rape counselor, I forget her name, got a call and said that this woman said she was a Girl Scout leader, and she was having a bunch of her Girl Scouts come to this camp down in Frewsburg, and they were going to, we asked this rape counselor to speak for these girls so that they got an idea of what this gal did and counseling and everything else, and she agreed. So she went to this camp down in Frewsburg, south of Frewsburg, and she went there, and the cabin appeared to be dark, and she stood around for a while, and then all of a sudden somebody approached her, a man approached her and hit her with a rock and knocked her down, and I assume was going to rape her. I hope that's the least he would do. I mean, he might have wanted to just kill her. I don't know what he did, but he knocked her down with a rock. This guy did it, and he took off and ran. She got up. Somehow she fought him off, and he took off and ran and got in a car somewhere and left. Well, apparently the police had a tap on some of these women that were being called, and they traced it. They thought they had a trace on it, and they went to Purpose, and of course he denied it, but they arrested him, and we got bailed out. She identified, I think what made the Purpura case so famous, it made the UPS and the AP, was the fact she identified a man with a mustache. She said he had a mustache. And they had Carl, we went in to try the case, and Carl didn't have a mustache. If I have it right, I think I'm right on that. And he hadn't had a mustache at the time of the incident. And so the Jamestown police were convinced another guy had done it. The sheriff's department was convinced Purpura had done it. And they had two different suspects, and it went to trial. And so I subpoenaed Jamestown police in there, and they're saying, well, it was this girl identified this picture of this guy with a mustache and all that. Ernewine and Siriano were on the other side, and that's why I ended up working with them years later. On the other side, saying, "No, we got this guy. We got a telephone tap. We got the and nobody knew who was on first and who was on third. You know what I mean? And so it went for a while, and all of a sudden, Lieutenant Adams said, "I'm having a recess here." And he went out and came back out and said, "I'm dismissing the charges." He said, "There's no one with who could find with a reasonable degree of certainty without a reasonable doubt that Perper did it. I mean, the police were going in different directions, and they all each thought they had their witness, they had their defendant, and so that's how it came out, and it was dismissed against him. And I never asked him whether he did it, but I don't know. But I did my job, and that was it.
Criminal world, criminal prosecution, criminal defense work. Were you glad ultimately to get into the world of just civil?
Yeah, I was. I mean, I liked being in a courtroom. I guess that's the simple answer. But yeah, I didn't like it because you really are. You have conflicts in your own mind. You know how you're going to handle things, and I just didn't like it. And I mean, I would do it if I was appointed. I was appointed. I had no choice. I did it. But I like civil cases, though some of those are gut-wrenching too. I mean, they really are, and especially when people are terribly maimed and get people that are killed, and daughters and sons, car accidents and things. That's just as bad sometimes.
One of the other cases, which was not, it was a civil case, but unique and probably set the stage, was really the Merrill Lynch case. And you want to talk about that?
Not much. Yeah. We resolved the case, and there was a cloture on it. We can't disclose the verdict anyway. I mean, I don't see why we can't talk a little bit about it, because appeal briefs were filed and they're public records. So, yeah, it was a situation where Enron, the guy by the name, it's in there, you know, his name escapes me, but I gave you a thing on his name. But he was an older gentleman in his 80s, and he had accumulated, he was a gas dealer, you know, propane gas type thing. And Enron, of course, was this huge company in California, and they were buying out anything and everything they could. And they eventually bought out a company that he had sold his business to, but had stock in it, and so he ended up with Enron stock when it got converted, and it was several millions of dollars. And he, at that time, Merrill Lynch, you probably know this, I'm sure you do. Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner & Smith is the retail arm for all stock sales. If you're going to buy stocks, you go to Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner, or any other stock brokerage. It could be Payne Webb or whatever. And they have they're the retail corporation, and there's Merrill Lynch worldwide, Merrill Lynch Inc. And they have Merrill Lynch Banking, Merrill Lynch this, and Merrill Lynch that, Merrill Lynch this. And they're a big subsidiary, they have a lot of subsidiaries. And you also know that if you open an account, you have to be bound by the National Association of Security Dealers. And so what happened was he lost several millions of dollars. And I won't go into in Enron stock, but I won't go into the people involved, because they're nice people, and they were part of a bad situation. But anyway, Enron stock started going down, and he had a broker, and he kept calling him, and the broker said, "I'll call the all these stockbrokers' houses have they have somebody following the stock. They have an analyst that specializes in this." And there was an analyst by the name of Johnson who was specializing in Enron. He was assigned that to make recommendations, buy, sell, hold, whatever. And he put a hold on it. And the reason was that Merrill Lynch had created these offshore limited partnerships called e-barges. And what they would do is they would park, it was not, you know, they have the Chinese wall, and one division shouldn't be communicating with another division. But Merrill Lynch Banking, Worldwide Banking, was loaning so much money to Enron, they didn't want to lose them as an account. And so when this Johnson put Enron stock on a hold, I guess Kenneth Lay went ballistic and demanded that they do something about that, or he wasn't going to do bank with them anymore. And so apparently what happened was that they fired this Johnson and got a guy by the name of Donato Esse in, and all of a sudden it went from a hold to a strong buy, you know, and you could tell what had happened there. You know, it didn't take a rocket scientist, you know, and they created these offshore limited partnerships, and what they would do was Enron would park a lot of crap they had, junk stocks, in E-barge. In these, and then Merrill Lynch would sell them as limited partnership ventures. And then when the stock got back up in January or February after year-end stock reports, the stuff would go back to Enron. And I don't know how so I went after Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner, and Smith. I didn't go after Enron because I'd have been on a bankruptcy mess for my lifetime. So I went after them, and nobody else had done it yet. And I went after them on the theory that there was a fraud, and I wanted to have an arbitration. But I also named Merrill Lynch and Co. Inc. and Merrill Lynch, and they came in and said, you can't, and they were it was the banking part of it that was the culprit, in my mind. They said, well, you can't bring us in because it's Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Finner, and Smith, Inc. is the NASDA representative for Merrill Lynch. I said, no, wait a minute. If you want to go to federal court, we'll all go to federal court, or we'll all go to arbitration. I'm offering you arbitration. No, you can't do that. So they went in front of Freddie Marshall Jr., who's now a Supreme Court judge, his dad was, and he agreed with Merrill Lynch and said, you can't sue Merrill Lynch and Co., the parent corporation. And I said, why not? And he said, well, I don't see where they're involved in this. It's just Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner, and Smith. And I said, well, absolutely they're involved in it. They're part of this thing. They're the big part of it. So we took an appeal and went to the appellate division, and I stated my case, and I said, and he said, well, what makes you think you should be able to go after Merrill Lynch and Co., Mr. Burgett? And I said, one, they're the guilty party to begin with, but two, they filed a DBA. Every time Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner, and Smith has an office in a county or a state, they file a DBA, doing business as Merrill Lynch and Co. So I said, they're a named defendant, they're part of it, Merrill Lynch and Co. And that was the one thing I found that gave me hope. I went down to the county and I said, how's the DBA, what kind of a DBA they had? Sure enough, Merrill Lynch and Co. See, that's the beauty of these big corporations. They want everybody to know how big they are and how important they are, so they filed a DBA. So I said, they're a DBA, doing business as Merrill Lynch and Co. I think they got to be pulled into this. And the appellate division said, we agree, unanimously. We walked out of there, Mary Hoydu and I, out of the appellate division. I said, I think we're going to get a call in about 10 days or less. Merrill Lynch and Co. International, the worldwide outfit, are not wanting to go to arbitration. They've never been before. They don't want to get into that mess where they're going to be called arbitration for everything in the parent corporation. So I said to Mary, I think we'll get a phone call. It wasn't 10 days later, it was 8. Come to New York, we want to talk. So then I went to New York and we resolved it.
Really, that was a trendsetter. Good for you.
You know, you got to find a way, you know, to get these guys.
You went before several judges over your distinguished career. Some are a little more charismatic than others,
Yep.
using the term, and one of them was Judge Leetown Adams.
Yeah.
Do you have a good Leetown Adams story?
Well, I can tell you a Leetown Adams story about me.
Okay.
Yeah. Leetown Adams asked me to help him with his campaign when he ran for county court judge down here. And I did. Years went by. And I had a divorce case, and I represented the wife, and I went up and I made an application for attorney's fees, which you normally do. And I don't know whether Lee had a bad day or what. He said, I'm not going to grant your attorney's fees. You haven't done anything. I said, well, Judge, every attorney that's involved in these matrimonial accidents, including you, have come up and asked for an award of attorney's fees. You got a housewife here. Where's she going to get the money? The husband's a breadwinner. If we're going to represent her, we need some sort. We need an order, a temporary order of temporary temporary support and alimony for her, and attorney's fees, so she can keep going here. And essentially, what he said, well, I'll order her some alimony, and I'll order some child support and set temporary visitation there. Well, I'm not giving you any attorney's fees. Well, I said, I can't understand this, Judge. You've always done it. Well, I'm not doing it today. and that was Lee. And I don't know what was going on with him. He had a bad day or something, so I walked out of there, and I just, But he's a bright guy. I mean, I don't mean to disparage him in any way. That was an experience I had a lot of good ones with him. But you never knew where you were with him. But what was in his mind at the time. But he was a brilliant guy. He was Phi Beta Kappa, he was a bright guy. And he had a good sense of humor in many ways. But every once in a while, you run a judge you think you know pretty well, and all of a sudden you find out something isn't working. And you don't know whether it's you or him or something else that you have no control over.
How much of your practice was venue shopping? Trying to figure out whether it's county court, Supreme Court, Buffalo, contiguous counties, hoping the judge gets assigned.
Yeah.
Was that a factor?
No, I don't, not so much the judge assigned. It was the money thing.
Okay.
Chautauqua County verdicts were extremely low. We have people here, and a lot of them who sit on juries are seniors. And Greg, $100,000 or $50,000 to them is a lot of money, and it was back then. I mean, it was a lot of money. And so when you try to draw a jury here in Chautauqua County, you try to. I grew up in Dunkirk. Dunkirk was Polish. A lot of Polish people. They're frugal. That's a mindset they have. The Dutchmen out in Chautauqua, out in Clymer, they're very frugal people. They're very fine people. They're just frugal. And you go in there and you ask a jury like that, even if it's a heinous injury for $1 million, I mean, they almost fell out of their chair. Mm-hmm. And yet, if you went to Buffalo, in a more metropolitan area, you might have a very a much more liberal, easy riding jury that their take-home pay was much higher. You could usually find a few people on a jury like that were moderately well-to-do, and they were more forgiving in that sense. But you really had to pick your jury, and if you could get to Buffalo or you could get to a larger metropolitan area, tactically, you would do it. And I had the largest verdict, I think, when it came down in Chautauqua County, and it was $1 million something. And I mean, the girl was brain damaged. And I don't know what I could have gotten. I couldn't get to Buffalo there. There wasn't I couldn't get it up there because I couldn't get a change of venue. Mm-hmm. But I think her case would have been worth a lot more. And you walk out and you say, what happened here? And what did I do? And you sit there and ask yourself that question. But in the last analysis, when you think about it, this is the people you have. And Chautauqua County had one of the lowest award rates than any other county in New York State. The closer you got to New York City, the bigger the awards.
Did you have, given your practice and your being in the PI world, and the PI world became pretty well known, you had to advertise because you had competition.
Yes.
Every time there was something, whether it's the Celino Barnes or the Edgar
Snyder.
And Burgett Robbins. I mean, you saw that. Was that a hard thing to do, to make that initial decision saying, we're going to have to do something which lawyers heretofore really didn't do much of?
Well, there were, that at one time lawyers were prohibited from advertising, as you know, and eventually there was a case decided. Somebody somewhere in New York started advertising, and they stopped them, and it went to trial, and it was a freedom of speech or whatever it was, the argument they made, and they suddenly said, okay, you can advertise, and it changed the world. When I first started practicing here, the first 25 years probably, you couldn't do it. You couldn't advertise. So what would happen here would be, you had many lawyers who didn't do personal injury work. I can name 20. And they, if they had a case come in, that was, they might have been the attorney that did the family's real estate and will, and then all of a sudden there's a car accident and somebody's got a couple broken legs and come in to see them, and they'd say, I really am, this isn't my specialty, I really don't know it, I'll refer you to another lawyer. And so that's what would happen. You get a referral from another attorney, but advertising, and especially the big ones like Celino Barnes, took that away. There was no middle, it didn't go to the old attorney, the family lawyer, who would find you a specialist. It's sort of like a GP saying, this is out of my general practice of medicine, I'm going to get you a specialist. They intercepted that and said, hey, we're the ones, don't bother to go anywhere else. And I mean, we were all forced into it for a while. We did it for a while. And I didn't like it. And you, how do you compete with a Celino and Barnes who gets I mean, their advertising budget, I was told, and I could be wrong, but I was told 15 years ago their advertising budget was $9 million a month. Now, how do you compete with that?
Wow.
Huh? And now they got offices in California, they got offices here and there. And I mean, I don't know about, I'm sure they got very good lawyers in there, but I can't say that one way or the other. I don't know who their attorneys are, but I never was with them because I'm on the same side, so we were competing. But the old time lawyers, the king of lawyers in Buffalo was Paul Belz. Yeah. He was a great lawyer. He had many multi-million-dollar recoveries.
Did you find with your reputation, I mean, once you got engaged, that there was and this may be an egotistical question for you to even answer, but that with your reputation, defense insurance carriers were more inclined to kind of talk to you earlier in the game?
Well, I'd have to say in some ways yes, because you have to make your bones. You got to try cases in front of the insurance company. If they don't know you, they're gonna not make it easy for you, okay? But when they see you and they know you can do it, and you got to prove it to them, then they'll talk to you. I mean, they'll throw you a bone and see what you do with it. But if you've been around and you've tried some cases and you start getting big verdicts, they start getting nervous. Mm-hmm. And then they'll sit down, and then they won't have they'll have the next level up or the next level up a guy in their office who does that kind of work come in, and you can be more direct with each other. I mean, you can say, like, da-da-da, and they'll know your soft spots in your case, and you'll know their soft spots. And they've done their homework on that, and you can try to get them resolved with them, but you've got to try cases and get verdicts, and they got to know that you can pull the trigger.
Did you get, those conversations normally were held with settlement agents, or were they done with the lawyers themselves? You know, did somebody from the insurance company call who's kind of upper and...
Oh yeah, sure they do. I don't know how each insurance company, I'm sure it's different, but they'll have an adjuster, and then if it looks like, you know, this thing could get beyond their policy limits, let's say they had 100,000 policy limits, and the adjuster's involved with it, and all of a sudden, you know, they get sued for $3 million, and there's a lawsuit, and they have a fiduciary duty as an insurance company to notify you, look, you're being sued for more than your coverage. You have a right to an attorney too, even though you're going to have to pay for that one. We're supplying you one. But they get nervous then, and I got a couple verdicts, well actually they settled, where they offered me, I had a case where they offered me $75,000 to settle it. They only had 100,000 policy. And I said to my client, look, you know, I can't get you any more unless you're willing to force the people to sell their house and stuff, because they're going to be personally liable. Their insurance company isn't enough to satisfy the case. And we hadn't tried it yet. We went in and tried it, and I got like $1 million verdict. So all of a sudden, and they would not settle with me. They only had 100,000 policy, and they offered me $35,000 to sell it. I said, I'm not going to do it. I said, I want your policy limits. I want the 100 grand. And I did it in front of a judge in writing on the record. And they said, oh, we're not going to pay you 100,000. Maybe we'll go 85,000. I said, it's 100,000. I said, this case is worth substantially more than that. I honestly didn't think it was worth what the verdict was that came in. Mm-hmm. But it came in, it was 600,000 to 800,000, I think. Maybe it was $1 million. It was a lot. And so I sued the insurance company personally, and I said, you acted in bad faith, and I'm going to sue you for punitive damages on top of it. So then they came in and settled with me, and we got a lot of, not all of it, but a lot of the 600 grand or whatever it was I had. But you have those situations, and you just, and some of them they're nerve-wracking for me or a lawyer, because, you know, you got to do your best for your client. And you know, some of these insurance companies were pretty arrogant, and they, you know, and we'll take a chance you're going to sue us for punitive damages. You know, we'll take another chance. And I did. I mean, and you back into litigation again, trying to get what they owe you, felt they owed you, you know, or at least a portion of it. And so you know, it's a crazy business, but it's the way it is.
As you reflect now, you're now being retired and look at a credible career, is litigation a skill set that can be learned, or is it kind of something you either got it or you don't?
I think it's both.
Yeah.
You have to, like I said, you have to make your bones, and you have to be there. But you also, I think some people are drawn to it. It's gut-wrenching at times. You lose a lot of weight. You get in a case, and you know, and you're going to lose. These people are. You want to do right by them, and you know, you're always nervous because you never know what a jury's going to do, and you go right up to the end with them, and all of a sudden it's good, or sometimes it's bad. I mean, I've had some disappointments in cases, and you know, I thought I had it, and boom, you know, they come up with some odd theory or something. The jury sitting there, or they don't like your client. You know, we never know, and so it's gut wrenching. But in the end, I like it.
What's next for Dalton Burgett? Here you are. You're
What's next for me? Nothing.
Fishing?
Yeah, I fish, hunt, and you know, we do a lot of things. I play golf. I'm busy. I like what I'm doing right now.
Do you miss it at all?
Yeah, sure. you know, got an ego.
Well, this has been fabulous, walking down memory lane. And in fact, I'll share, just for the record, there was an article by Manley Anderson, $8.5 million settlement reached for a boat mishap, which unfortunately dealt with a neighbor of ours.
Yes.
Carlson's, and I see in the very last sentence that there were other people who were involved, including an attorney named Cynthia Peterson of Jamestown.
Yes, your wife. Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't want to bring that up.
I'm going to have to make a copy of that, because rare was the time where she would be there in court. So, is there question I should be asking you, Dalby, as we, kind of wrap this up, that you were expecting that I really haven't gotten to?
No, I think we got it pretty well covered.